Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye is in the Philippines for this year's APEC summit. She's due to hold talks with her Canadian and Filipino counterparts this afternoon. The European Union agrees to provide aid and assistance to France following the Paris terror attacks. As it emerges, not one but two suspects may be at large after video shows a third man in a car used by the terrorists. Plus, in the wake of the Paris attacks, Korea's ruling party and the government agreed to spend an extra $85 million strengthening anti-terrorism measures. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 18th of November. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start this afternoon in Manila, where President Park Geun-hye is set to meet with the leaders of Canada and the Philippines on the sidelines of this year's APEC summit. Our presidential office correspondent Hwang Sang-hee has the details.
President Park's main topics for discussion with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be the Korea-Canada Free Trade Agreement and climate change cooperation. This is their first meeting since Trudeau took office last month.
As the summit will be the first meeting between the two leaders, it will be an opportunity for them to get to know each other and intensify Korea and Canada's practical cooperation.
As for her meeting with Filipino President Benigno Aquino, President Park is set to discuss bolstering political, military, and economic cooperation. The two leaders will also talk about beefing up the protection of Korean nationals in the Philippines, as the Southeast Asian nation is notorious for having the most number of crimes targeting Koreans. And with the two leaders expected to exchange opinions on regional issues, attention is on whether President Park will give a clear position on the South China Sea dispute. Later in the day, the South Korean leader will meet with the APEC Business Advisory Council and hold an unofficial dialogue with the Pacific Alliance, which is a Latin American trade bloc composed of Chile, Colombia, Peru, and Mexico. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News, Manila.
The Korean government and the ruling Saenuri Party have agreed to allocate an extra $85 million for terrorism prevention measures in Korea at an emergency meeting in Seoul this morning. They also agreed to revise the nation's aviation law to tighten security and make it mandatory for Korean nationals living overseas to provide fingerprints when coming into the country. They are not currently required to do that. The government said it would also add an additional $22 million to the Welfare Ministry's budget for next year to protect the nation against bioterrorism and chemical attacks. The Parliamentary Intelligence Committee says around 10 Korean nationals have been identified as supporters of the Islamic State militant group. Now, police in Europe are on the hunt for a second suspect thought to have been involved in last weekend's terror attacks in Paris. As the authorities work round the clock to find them, the European Union has pledged to stand behind France in its fight against terrorism. Kwon Jang-ho has this report.
French security forces said Tuesday that video surveillance shows a new unaccounted-for suspect involved in the attacks that killed 129 people in Paris last Friday. The suspect is reportedly seen shooting from the car that was later found abandoned in a Paris suburb. One of the other shooters is Salah Abdeslam, who until now was thought to be the only surviving attacker. He is now the subject of a Europe-wide manhunt. The French government has responded to the attacks by triggering a never-before-used EU treaty clause that calls on all EU member states to come to its aid in its fight against the terrorists. Article 42.7 stipulates that if a member state is the victim of armed aggression in its territory, the other member states shall have towards it an obligation of aid and assistance by all means in their power. While the EU agreed to the clause in principle, bilateral negotiations between France and other EU states will be needed to determine exactly what assistance can be provided. Security fears have spread to Germany, where an international football game between Germany and Holland was called off after a bomb threat. The Hanover Stadium was evacuated 2 hours before the game, which was due to be attended by Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel. There has been no official confirmation whether any explosives have been found in the area. However, a match between England and France went ahead in London, where, in a show of solidarity, the crowd of more than 70,000 was encouraged to sing the French national anthem, followed by a minute's silence. Wembley Stadium Arch was also lit up in blue, white and red, the colours of the French flag. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
Now, the hacking group Anonymous claims to have taken down 5,500 Twitter accounts tied to the militant group that calls itself Islamic State. The collective recently declared cyber war on the terror organization in the wake of those terror attacks in Paris. Anonymous also published the web addresses of alleged ISIS-affiliated websites, dark web pages, Twitter accounts, Tumblr accounts, Facebook pages and web servers. The information even includes the physical address of a person it claims is an ISIS recruiter in Europe. However, none of the details that have been shared have been independently confirmed yet. And Russia has confirmed that a passenger jet that crashed over Egypt's Sinai Peninsula last month was brought down by a bomb. Russia's FSB security service reached its conclusion on Tuesday that the crash was an act of terrorism, saying a homemade bomb containing around 1 kilogram of TNT went off on board, causing the plane to break up in midair. The Islamic State militant group had already claimed responsibility for the attack. Russian President Vladimir Putin has vowed to punish those who carried out the attack and has ordered an increase in airstrikes on ISIS-held territory in Syria. However, Egypt continues to maintain terrorism has yet to be proven. It has also denied reports that 2 employees at Sharm el-Sheikh airport have been detained on suspicion of involvement in the crash. The Russian Metrojet aircraft crashed 23 minutes after takeoff from Sharm el-Sheikh, killing all 224 people on board. Now, in some news coming in within the last hour or so, there are growing indications UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon will visit Pyongyang next week. Citing an official at the North Korean Central News Agency, China's state-run Xinhua News Agency reports Ban will arrive in the North Korean capital next Monday, November 23rd, and stay there for 4 days. Ban will likely fly to Pyongyang from Kuala Lumpur, where he is due to attend the East Asia Summit the day before. Now, reports first surfaced this week that Ban would visit Pyongyang. The UN chief is expected to hold talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on the regime's nuclear weapons program and its human rights situation. A renowned Washington-based think tank has expressed concern North Korea could launch some low-level provocations next year. Experts say certain military moves could be undertaken to deflect attention away from the regime's internal problems. Kim Hyun-bin has this report.
Chief Korea analyst with the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Victor Cha, and researcher Lisa Collins predict North Korea could conduct low-level provocations sometime next year. In the think tank's global forecast released on Tuesday, the two state that the North's leader is vulnerable to attacks over his legitimacy since taking power. The report says the gap between the regime and its people is growing, as increasing external pressures are shaking the North Korean leadership's stability. The researchers emphasize that projecting weakness is the last thing Pyongyang wants. To distract attention from its unstable government, researchers say North Korea could attempt to project a strong image through its military strengths and showcase Kim Jong-un's grip on power. They say low-scale provocations could be in the works as it presents the regime's military capabilities without provoking full-scale war. The report also says North Korean society is starting to be informed of the outside world, with markets playing a greater role in people's livelihoods, helping to bring in outside information to the secluded nation. Another sign of leadership struggles is the purging of around 70 top military aides, including Kim Jong-un's uncle Chang Song-taek and Defense Minister Hyun Yong-chul. The two analysts say these are key signs of the regime's weaknesses. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, Samsung Electronics outstripped its rivals in terms of smartphone sales in emerging markets in the third quarter, according to market research firm Strategy Analytics on Wednesday. Samsung's smartphones ranked first out of 14 countries in what it calls the next 15 emerging markets. Now, these countries include Southeast Asian nations, as well as Australia, Nigeria, and the Netherlands, where the smartphone market is still expanding pretty rapidly. Samsung sold the most smartphones in every country on the list except for the Philippines. The Korean tech giant far outpaced its rivals in Egypt, Turkey, and Romania, where it had about half of the market share. LG Electronics has announced that its smart TVs will provide thousands of movies and TV shows through Google Play Movies and TV, making it the first Korean manufacturer to do so. Starting this month, the Google Play app will be rolled out to LG's WebOS smart TVs, as well as models that use earlier platforms. Now, users will be able to buy or rent titles on their TVs and watch them either on their TVs or their smartphones, tablets, or even PCs as well. An LG official says the smart TV market is growing very rapidly, and meeting the demand for fresher, high-quality content is the company's highest priority. LG customers in the United States, Britain, Australia, and Canada will be the first to receive the Google update. Credit card spending by foreign visitors to Korea slumped to a two-year low in the third quarter of this year, tumbling almost 40% on year. According to data compiled by the Bank of Korea, foreign visitors put $2 billion on their plastic in the July to September period. And in terms of on-quarter, that is down 26%. The central bank attributes the drop to the outbreak of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, in late May, which scared away tourists, especially those from China. Credit card spending by Koreans overseas over the same period was around $3.5 billion, down a mere 0.5% compared to the previous quarter. Now, if you are a regular drinker of coffee, then we have some very welcome news for you. A new study has found that people who drink a moderate amount of coffee each day may actually live longer. According to researchers at Harvard University, drinkers of both caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee were at lower risk of death from heart disease, diabetes, neurological diseases, and even suicide. The researchers analysed health data from more than 208,000 people over the space of 30 years. However, experts noted that this was an observational study only based on self-reported data and does not show a cause and effect relationship. The study was published in the latest edition of the journal Circulation. Now, many people who suffer from depression say they can't live without antidepressants. And while the usual drugs are available here in Korea, many Koreans continue to shun antidepressants due to the social stigma that continues to surround them. Our Son Jung-in has this report.
The OECD's latest Health at a Glance report shows South Korea has the second lowest consumption of antidepressants among its member nations at 20 doses a day for every 1,000 people. That's a third of the OECD average of 58 doses a day. Chile was the only country with a lower consumption rate than Korea. Iceland had the highest prescribing rate at 118 daily doses. For a country with one of the highest usage of antibiotics and other drugs, the latest report may come as welcome news, but it seems contradictory considering Korea has the highest suicide rate in the OECD. Untreated depression is the #1 cause of suicide, so treating depression early is crucial. However, many Koreans remain reluctant to seek medical help for mental health issues as it still carries a heavy stigma. Experts say that in order to lower the suicide rate, attitudes toward treating depression should be changed so people feel comfortable speaking to a health professional about their feelings. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now to some good news for people who don't really like the cold, because this winter, this upcoming winter in Korea, is expected to be relatively mild compared to normal years, but it's going to be wetter. And it's all coming from a rather intense El Niño conditions in the Pacific Ocean. Now, according to Korea's weather agency, this is because surface waters in the tropical Pacific have continued to exceed the average annual temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. Now, the El Niño climate pattern is expected to peak this winter and is actually set to become one of the strongest since 1950. The El Niño phenomenon occurs when sea temperatures in the mid-eastern Pacific Ocean rise during winter. Well, those are stories we have for you at this hour. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website. It can be found by going to arirang.com/news. Have a wonderful Wednesday. Goodbye.